Another fantastic question in Richard Worker, our resident lawyer. I always try and trip you up and trick you out, but I feel like this one you've got it covered as well. This is a tricky one, but my dad, who recently passed away, has left a life interest in the family home to my stepmother. What does this mean, as I'm getting very different stories from my friends and relatives as to what this means?
Right, so obviously if it's my stepmother, it means it's a second marriage.
Sure.
So what's happened is that the property it might be in both names, both husband and wife's name, so in dad and the stepmother's name, or it might just be in dad's name. But what the life interest does is it allows the widow, the stepmother, to reside in the house until she dies or whatever. You could have a earlier repartner or early remarriage clause or something like that. But it allows her to remain in the house. It is very, very important. They're a necessary evil, life interest.
Sure.
I've never really seen a life interest work very well because the kids are just waiting for the wicked stepmother or the wicked stepfather to pass on before they get their inheritance. It is just one of those unfortunate situations. And the other problem is that if the house was owned jointly, or not jointly, but as tenants in common, so half each by the father, the deceased father, and now stepmother, it means that if the stepmother wants to move on, in other words, the house is too big for her and so on, she has to go to the executors of her late husband's estate, of the father's estate, and say, look, I want to move on, will you agree to that? So all of a sudden she's now beholden to somebody else to agree with her to move house. If she wants to move to a retirement village, there's another vexed question, because obviously there's a 30%, I'll call it a loss, they call it an investment, there's 30% loss on that. And so the executors or the trustees of the late husband's estate may say, well, you know, it's not really good business for us to allow you to do that because we're losing 30% and, you know, the beneficiaries, in other words, your stepchildren, may not be happy with that. So life interests, they're a necessary evil, as I say. They are important. I prefer to actually do wills now where the parties, depending on the length of marriage also, or the length of relationship. I mean, if it's a 2-year relationship, well, that's a different story. But if it's been a long-term relationship, 10, 15, 20 years, then it may be that each party should leave property to each other outright, so they can then decide what to do while they're alive. But on the death of the survivor, they leave everything equally between the husband's children and their own children, and they can contract to do that, which I quite like that now. It just gives her, in this case the stepmother, gives her more freedom to do what she wants to do.
It's tricky.
It is very tricky.
It's very tricky, especially if you have, as you say, one of the children or side of the family. There was a situation with a friend of mine whose happened. It was actually reversed, so it was the mum who passed away first, and so it was the stepdad, and then the stepdad was living in the house, and then the kids asked or put a lawyer to put in a notice that they need to sell the house or give them half of the house straight away. And then basically the lawyer there, the father's lawyer, just basically put a cease and desist. It can be quite nasty. I mean, you know, it can be quite and it's terribly stressful for the survivor. But somehow the kids of the deceased, so in this case the dad's kids, sort of think, well, you know, she's much younger than he was, she's 15 years younger or something, I've got to wait that much longer for my inheritance now. You know, and how do we know the house is going to be in good condition or whatever? But equally the widow needs somewhere to live. So it is what it is. Richard Worker, thank you so much.
Great pleasure, Nick. Nice to see you again.
Likewise.